Good morning. Welcome to Refinery Church. We're glad to have you here with us this morning. If you would like to stand and join us, we are going to start off with some songs here.
Victory. When all I see is the mountain, you see a mountain. And as I walk through the shadow, your love surrounds me. There's nothing to fear now, for I am saved. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees, with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. And if you are for me, who can be against me? For Jesus, there's nothing impossible. See the beauty. When all I see is the cross, God, you see the empty tomb. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees, with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. An almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadow. You win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. An almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadow. You win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. An almighty fortress, you go before us. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. You shine in the shadow, you win every battle. Nothing can stand against the power of our God. So when I fight, I'll fight on my knees, with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you, and every fear I lay at your feet. I'll sing through the night. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. Oh God, the battle belongs to you.
God of Abraham, You're the God of covenant and of faithful promises. And time again, you have proven you'll do just what you said. Though the storms may come and the winds may blow, I'll remain steadfast and let my heart learn when you speak your word, it will come to pass. The great is your faithfulness to me. Yeah, great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting same, I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me. Oh,
though the earth may pass away, your word remains the same. Your history can prove there's nothing you can do. You're faithful and true.
though the storms may come and the winds may blow, I'll remain steadfast and let my heart learn when you speak a word, it will come to pass. That great is your faithfulness to me. Yeah, great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting same, I will praise your name. 'Cause great is your faithfulness to me.
I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. He'll never let me down. I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. He'll never let me down. 'Cause I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. He'll never let me down. I put my faith in Jesus, my anchor to the ground, my hope and firm foundation. He'll never let me down. 'Cause great is your faithfulness to fragrance of heaven, pour your spirit out, pour your spirit out.
From hearts that burn with holy fear, purified in faith and deed, refiner's fire, strengthen what remains. So be the church who bear your light, lamp of flame, city bright, King and kingdom come is what we pray.
We need a fresh wind, the fragrance of heaven. Pour your spirit out, pour your spirit out. A holy anointing, the power of your presence. Pour your spirit out, pour your spirit out. Pour your spirit out.
Pour your spirit out.
Pour your spirit out.
Pour your spirit out.
Pour your spirit out.
Pour your spirit out.
Pour your spirit out.
Pour your spirit out.
Pour your spirit out.
Pour your spirit out.
Pour your spirit out.
Pour your spirit out.
Pour your spirit out.
Pour your spirit out.
Pour your spirit out. Let all the redeemed prophesy and sing. We can hear the wind blowing, blowing, blowing. Move upon our praise. Sons and daughters sing. We can hear the wind blowing, blowing, blowing. Let all the redeemed prophesy and sing. 'Cause we can hear the wind blowing, blowing, blowing. Move upon our praise. Sons and daughters sing. 'Cause we can hear the wind blowing, blowing. 'Cause we need a fresh wind, the fragrance of heaven. Pour your spirit out, pour your spirit out. A holy anointing, the power of your presence. Pour your spirit out, pour your spirit out, pour your spirit out.
Just join me in prayer. Heavenly Father God, I just want to pray to you this morning and just lift you up as we think of your Son Jesus, his death on the cross, God, and his resurrection, that we can live through him and that we can live knowing that he's forgiven our sins, God. Just what an amazing gift. And God, we just pray that we can continue to seek a deeper relationship with you, and that you would just keep reaching out to us, and God, that we can just remain diligent in trying to spend that time with you. And Lord, I just pray that we can help each other out with that as well, and with all these people here this morning, Lord, that we can just help to further our relationship with you, and that we do that together, and that's something that the body of Christ can encourage each other with. I just pray this morning as this word is shared, God, that you would just speak it into us and help us to receive that and hear what it is that you're saying. And it's just in your name that I pray. Amen.
Hey everyone. 3 years ago, we started the Generosity Project with just an idea. We were going to be learning about generosity in Kids Zone, and so I just thought, man, we need to put this into practice and come up with a practical way of giving something to somebody else, somebody that needs something badly. And so So I was hoping that at Christmas we could come up with a few $100 to put a hamper together for one family. Well, did I ever sell that short? And the word got out about it, and the whole church got involved, and we ended up helping out 2 families with over $1,800 worth of presents and gift cards and grocery gift cards and gas cards, and just wow. And then the next year came around and we did it again. 3 families, over $3,000 given towards it, and all sent to them in various gifts and so on. And then last year, wow, like wow. Again, didn't know exactly where it was all gonna go. Kind of had a heart for some more families. Ended up with 7 families in need that we helped out, and you gave just over $10,000. And boy, did we have a blast loading up those Christmas hampers and wrapping all those gifts and, grocery cards worth hundreds of dollars just to take the pressure off of Christmas, because I know with some of these families, they didn't know where Christmas was going to come from. So well done. And then you add to that, we helped Waverly School round up 147 pairs of mitts because they have a need for those. Well done. Well, it's a new year, and it's time for another giving adventure, and I hope that you'll join in with this. We don't have the who nailed down quite yet, and that's kind of like every year we've done this, but that's coming together pretty quick, and I'm guessing in these economic times that the need is going to be greater, and we'll probably try to help out as many or maybe more families as we did last year. That's going to come together, I think, in the next week or 2. One thing we do know is Waverly School could use more mitts. And so if you would like to once again go buy some brand new kid-size mitts to donate to them, you just need to bring them here to the church over the next few weeks and we will get them to them. Now, a big part of the giving adventure, the generosity project, is how much will be given. I have no idea. That makes me sweat it out a little bit, but you know what? I'm always amazed of the generosity of others. And so I hope you'll give to this, and if you would like to, you can either give here in person at the offering boxes, or you can give online. You just have to e-transfer give at refinerychurch.ca. And the very important part of this is it needs to be well labeled Generosity Project. Every dollar that comes in for the Generosity Project will go out to these families. It's a great way for us to be generous with nothing expected in return. And so I hope that you'll wrestle with this with your family. It's a great opportunity for parents to talk about this with their kids. You know, if your kids even have a little piggy bank and want to give $1.37, that all helps. It's all going to go towards these families. And don't just stop at your families. Maybe your co-workers could pool together, or neighbors. You know what? I think people have a desire to be generous to those in need, and maybe others will pitch in as well. And so I hope you'll join in as we aim to make this a very Merry Christmas for a bunch of families.
That sounds like an awesome project. I love it. I love it. It's so good to be here with you today. You know what? This is the highlight of my week every week, is getting together with you guys and just being here and sharing together. And I'm telling you, if you're online, I'm so glad that you're engaging online. And we want to invite you sometime to be able to come in person. We hope that you'd be able to do that, because there's stuff that happens in person that just doesn't happen online. And the one-on-one conversations and the getting to see people, and a little bit of light helps me see people a little bit better even. That's outstanding. It is good to see you. It's good to be here with you. Last week I shared with you that John and Joan Sinclair, who have been a part of our church family for many, many, many years, Joan had a brain bleed last Saturday and was taken to hospital. And I met with John in the hospital on Saturday evening, and his comment to me was about planning the funeral and planning to bury his wife. And things have changed since then, and there's been changes all week long, and we asked you to pray about their situation last week. John has sent me a note here this morning at about 5 o'clock. We were texting with one another, and he sent me this and asked if I could share this with the church family. So this is from John, and he says this. He says, Joan Sinclair has had a week of ups and downs. For someone with such a severe brain injury, she made good progress early in the week. Successfully, she was weaned off of her ventilator, consequently transferred out of the ICU into a slightly less acute ward. She became more responsive and could answer questions such as, what is your last name and what year is it? And she was getting those correct, obviously, that's the case. She could also move each limb on request. In the last few days, her energy levels have been declining. It's more difficult to rouse her from slumber. In a single session, she can only move 1 or 2 limbs and answer 1 question before falling off to sleep again. But when she does respond to questions, her answers are bang on, which is very encouraging. Tests to date have been unable to explain the increased drowsiness. It's challenging not to have answers, but also encouraging that nothing else is obviously wrong. So it has been a little bit of a week of ups and downs for them, but there have been some significant ups, and we continue to praise God for that and continue to pray. John also said, if I could share this, I'm immensely grateful for the support that has been received and all of the prayer warriors who immediately went to battle for Joan. I love the wording there. Went to battle for Joan. Isn't that awesome? Prayer is powerful. And John, I'm asking everyone to remain hopeful and keep the faith. I'm doing my best to look after myself and take it one day at a time and stay sharp so I can support Joan in whatever way required. Praying that Joan and I can go together down a long road to recovery. So for those of you who have been praying for John and for Joan, please continue to do so. Prayers, it is so powerful. And the number of praise gods that John has texted me this week have been absolutely fantastic to see. So continue in prayers for John and for Joan, please. One other note before I get started here is we've been planning for months now. We've been kind of walking through a lot of things through the summer months as to what we are doing as a church and how we're engaging our community and so on, and how can we do a better job of such things. And one of the things that we latched onto is that we wanted to identify sort of the felt needs in our community and see if there's a way that we can kind of connect the church with some of the felt needs. And so as we did some research and we did some demographic studies on the area, we did some in Sherwood Park and some out in the Meadows community and some over in the communities that are closest to the church building in Kenilworth and Otwell. And we decided that we were going to focus on those communities right now and try to reach into those communities as best we can. So we've come up with an advertising campaign called Make Life Work. And what we've done is we've put together, starting on December 2nd, there's going to be some large billboard signs that are going to go out on 50th Street and 75th Street to try and capture the traffic in those community areas. We're also going to be sending out these postcards. They're kind of an oversized postcard. And I'm going to just read this to you. It says, life is complicated, and we know that you want to make life work. For over 25 years, we've been helping people just like you discover a practical faith that leads to greater meaning and direction. On the backside, it says, make life work. And then it says, make marriage work, make finances work, make school work, make relationships work, make family work, make career work, make friendships work, and insert whatever there. Make life work. Visit us at Refinery Church. So it's not an invitation to any particular event, but it's an invitation to really to God and to an answer to the problems that face our world today that all of us wrestle with, regardless of whether you're in a relationship with Christ or not. So what we're going to be doing is on December the 3rd, it's a Saturday, we're going to be delivering those postcards. We got 3,100 of them, 3,100 homes that we're going to be delivering those to. So I'm asking for your help on that. Some of you have already, do you know that somebody came to me before we even got this rolling and said, if we had something to deliver in the community, I'd love to help out with that. And I was like, what? God's already gone before. This is absolutely amazing. So if you would like to help, our plan is to get together here at 10 a.m., 10 o'clock, that's sleeping in. 10 o'clock right here on Saturday, December the 3rd. We're going to blitz the community. We're going to just go through, and we've got routes planned out. You can do it together as a family, or we'll get groups together, however it works. It does take about an hour to do 100 homes. So if we got about 30 of us, it would take roughly an hour to hit the whole, both Kenilworth and Otwell communities. Then we would come back here for pizza lunch. Now we've baited the hook a little. No, I hope that you're able to help out. Please let me know if you can help out. You can send me an email, you can phone me, you can talk to me right after service. I'd love to hear from you. Some of you have already indicated that you'd like to help out that way. We're going to get a crew together, and we're going to reach out. We want people to know that there's answers to today's problems, that indeed life is complicated, but we want to help. Isn't that what we're about as a church family? Yes, it is. So please let me know if you can get involved. We'd love to have you. All right. Let me get into things here. Many years ago, and it feels like many years ago, I used to live in a city called Johnson City, and it's down in Tennessee, and nobody knows where that is. It's right in the northeast corner of Tennessee, and it's within about 10 to 15 minutes of North Carolina and about 10 to 15 minutes to Kentucky. They call it the Tri-States area. And every state in the States has a Tri-States area. I've determined that now. But we were living in the Tri-States area in Johnson City, Tennessee. And right outside of Johnson City, it's not a big city, but right outside, it's about like Red Deer-ish, somewhere in that range. Right outside, like Edmonton to Sherwood Park type of thing, there was a town called Jonesboro. And if you've never heard of Johnson City, you've never heard of Jonesboro. I've got some pictures that I got of Jonesboro here that we're going to throw up on the screen here. This is Jonesboro. That's the courthouse in Jonesboro. And this place kind of it was close to my heart. And part of the reason why is twofold. One, they had some great antique stores. And I'm telling you, if you like old Coca-Cola stuff, the antique stores in the United States just blow away the stuff that we've got here. And these guys had some of the best. It was absolutely fantastic. Secondly, I could get newspapers from all over the place in Jonesboro, Tennessee. And so I could get 2-day-old, like Toronto newspapers, or I could get the USA Today there, or the different newspapers that I wasn't able to get in Johnson City, which was a much bigger city. And so I was very excited to go to Jonesboro as often as I could. Also, it's just, let's go to the next picture. I wish you could get a feel for this place. Like this is just like it's sort of it's a very small town. It's extremely quaint. Shoot the next one up there too. This is the oldest city in the state of Tennessee. 1700s it goes back to. This place right here, it's a wood structure. It's a hotel, and it was built in the 1700s. Like, it's phenomenal. Next shot. Look at that fall picture, sir. Look at how beautiful this is. Yeah, right there. I think that's the antique shop right there. Oh, just like, I want to go back so badly. This was the most fantastic place. Now, with all of its charm and everything else, there is a reason that this place is known and extremely well known if you sort of run in certain circles. Is there another picture? Yeah, look at that, eh? These were the newer buildings in town. Absolutely amazing. Okay, so this place is known because it is the home of the International Storytelling Festival every year. Every year, right around this time, I'd have to check the dates, but right like sort of late fall, kind of moving into Christmas and stuff, or for them moving into Thanksgiving and such, this is the place to gather if you like stories. Show that next picture here. Let's show. I wish you could get a better idea of what's going on here. They set up tents in town, and they've got just some park areas and stuff, and they'll just set up these massive white tents. And I mean massive. You can't see the fellas talking there, but this is in one of the tents, and in the background, kind of smaller, that's people. But there's hundreds, there's probably a couple of thousand people in that room. Look at me, just like, I can't stand still. I'm fired up about this. There's probably a couple of thousand people in that tent. That's how big it is. And they're gathered to hear that dude. Show the next one. Look at that. So there's this sort of park area with this giant gazebo. And people gather in the evenings, and they'll do storytelling in the evenings. And you can see how they light it up and stuff. It's 15,000 people just descend on this town of 13, or however many live there. There's nobody hardly living there. And it's just overrun. Like, the streets it's like New York City all of a sudden. There's people everywhere. You can't drive in the town. Show the next one. Woo! They tell ghost stories at night. They got some great ghost storytellers. And so this is what's going on here. Like, it is the most phenomenal thing. It's the greatest event. Do any of you like a good story? Yeah? 3? Come on, everybody likes a good story, don't we? We gotta love good story. And I mean, it's why books are so popular. You can ditch the slide there now. We can show more later. It's such a neat little place. But story, like, books are so popular, movies are so popular because we love the stories, right? People love hearing stories. Stories impact. You can probably remember, and depending on your age, you can maybe remember your parents reading you stories as a kid, and you can think about, oh, I remember the story about green eggs and ham. Or I remember that story, it was about 1 fish, 2 fish. Redfish. See, we know it, right? You heard the story. We know these things, right? There's other Dr. Seuss classics that you maybe were a part of. Maybe you read them to your children, or maybe as a child you grew up with Hardy Boys. I had all the Hardy Boys books. I remember those. I loved reading the Hardy Boys books. Nancy Drew, maybe some of you had that. Or Bobbsey Twins. Maybe that's kind of your sort of thing, right? Like, these are great stories, right? Some of you have been down to Pine Lake as campers or as counselors. There's a story that circulates there about the Goat Man. Have you heard about the Goat Man? That was a big one. Anyhow, maybe I'm dating myself a little bit. Stories can leave a mark, can't they? They leave a mark. I love true stories. They're probably my favorite. In fact, my favorite movies, and I'm not much of a book reader these days, but I love movies, and they tend to be the ones that are based on true stories. I love those movies based on true stories. I particularly like stories about individuals from history, because there's something captivating about a person's story. I love to sort of engage with those historical accounts and stuff like that. And here's what's really, really great about all this. Here's what's so absolutely cool about this. Everybody, you included, me included, everybody has a story. We all have a story. You've got one, and you've got one. I feel like Oprah. You got a story, and you got a story, like that. And maybe you've never thought about this before, but your story is important. Your story, it matters, and it matters deeply, and your story has value. And what we're going to see today is, if you're here today, or you're watching online today, and you're a follower of Jesus Christ, man, that is so fantastic. But I want to tell you something, that your story can be the difference maker in somebody else coming to know the person of Jesus Christ. And we can make that even more personal. Your story can be the difference maker in somebody coming to enter into a relationship, a friendship with Jesus Christ. We're in a teaching series right now where we're studying the book of Galatians in the Bible. There's many books in the Bible, and we're pulled out this one, Galatians, and we're taking a look at it. Galatians, it's a book in the Bible, but it was actually a letter that was written to a group of churches right in the central area of Turkey. So if you can kind of picture the world map in Turkey, and it's kind of right in that central area of Turkey, and it was written around 50 AD, so very, very close. It just followed right on the footsteps of the time of Jesus. And at that time, that area of central Turkey, it was referred to as Galatia. That was how it was known in the world, was as Galatia. And so when Paul writes this letter to the churches that were meeting there, he addresses it to the Galatians. Last week, we saw that this author, Paul, he was pretty upset. And he was a little fired up because there was a group of Jewish Christians who had come into Galatia. They came into central Turkey, and they were causing trouble. They were stirring up a lot of trouble for some of these new followers of Jesus Christ. People who had just heard about Jesus and said, I'm there. I want to follow. I want to be a part. I want to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. And so these sort of rabble-rousers, they wanted to make following Jesus about more than what Jesus made it. So Jesus came along and said, this is what it's like, this is what it means, this is how you enter into a relationship with me, this is what it means to be a disciple. And then for Jesus, it was all about grace. We talked about that last week. It was all about grace. It was all about you and me and anybody simply accepting the love of God, the gift of God through his son Jesus, and just striving to follow Jesus every single day. But for this group of these Jewish Christians, they wanted to make it about a whole lot more. Yeah, that was all good and everything, thanks Jesus, but there's all these ceremonies, there's all this ritual, there's all of these rites, R-I-T-E-S, there's all of these things, there's these hoops that you need to jump through, and you need to do it at the right time, and you need to do it in the right way. And so they were about what we would call today religion. They're all about religion. Jesus was all about relationship. He was all about this, you and me, you and me, you and me. He was all about relationship. They were all about, did you do the right thing at the right time in the right way? That was it. It was all about that religion. And it's interesting, because even in our culture today, and we find the same thing to be true today as they found to be true in 50 AD, people today in our culture, they get turned off by religion. I encounter that all the time. People get turned off by religion. And it's not that they're necessarily even turned off by Jesus. It's not like Jesus has done something in particular to offend them or turn them off, but it's religion. They're turned off by all of the add-ons, all of the man-made add-ons to relationship. This is exactly what was happening in Galatia. And so last week we looked at how Paul, he's writing this letter and he's trying to encourage these followers of Jesus to simply stick to the good news of Jesus Christ. Remember we talked about that, the gospel, he says. Stick just to the gospel of Jesus Christ, which means the good news. Just stick to that. There's no add-ons required. Just Jesus, Jesus only. Jesus only. In other words, Paul's saying, guys, gals, there's one gospel. There's one message, and it's very, very good news, and there's only one. And it doesn't come to us, and we don't attain it somehow by jumping through hoops. We don't attain it by doing the right things at the right time, in the right way. It's not done by going through this man-made sort of structures. It comes to us simply by the grace of God, and it's a gift that you choose. Nobody does it for you. You choose whether you're going to accept it or not. Now, these Christ followers in Galatia, they were all confused about all this stuff, and they were going around and they're like, I don't make sense of any of this stuff. How do we know what we should follow? How do we know who we should follow? Jesus said this, but these guys seem to be, they're kind of religious folk, and they're saying this, and is it about relationship like Jesus said, or is it about religion like these guys are saying? Is it about receiving grace and accepting a free gift? Or is it about rites and rituals and ceremony and duty and obligation? They were a very, very confused bunch. Very confused. And so Paul writes this letter, and he's trying to help clear some things up for them. Let me read this to you. I want to just share this. This is still in chapter 1 of Galatians, and we'll put it on the screen for you. Here's what Paul writes. He says, I want you to know, and this is following on what we talked about last week. So if you missed last week, I tried to catch us up a little bit there. We got the Coles Notes version. Now you maybe want to listen to it for yourself online. You can go ahead and do that. But here's where Paul continues to go with this. He says, I want you to know, brothers, the gospel that I received, the good news that I received about Jesus Christ, the good news that I preached, it's not something that men made up. This isn't something that was, concocted in a room somewhere and somebody came up with this plan and this idea. It wasn't something that anybody made up. I did not receive it from any man, nor was I even taught it. Rather, I received it by revelation from Jesus Christ. Well, okay, I'm not going to be able to explain that fully. I don't know exactly how somehow the Spirit of God, somehow God was able to impart some knowledge to Paul in a very unique and special way, a revelation from Jesus himself. He says, for you've heard of my previous way of life in Judaism, which was sort of the religion of the day. He says, you've heard about me. You know my story. You heard how intensely I persecuted the church of God and tried to destroy it. That was Paul's role in life, to destroy the ministry of Jesus, to destroy the folks who were choosing to follow him. He says, I was advancing in Judaism, religion, beyond many of the Jews of my own age. I stood out. I had this box that I could stand on, and it was a little higher than everybody else's because I was doing really good. I was extremely zealous for the traditions of my fathers. But when God, who set me apart from birth and called me by his grace, was pleased to reveal his Son, Jesus, in me, that I might preach him amongst the Gentiles, just non-Jewish folk, I didn't consult any man. I didn't go up to Jerusalem to see those who were apostles before I was. I immediately went to Arabia, and later I returned to Damascus. Now, Arabia in those days was kind of our modern day, just outside of Israel, would be where Jordan is, and then kind of coming south from Jordan and even moving into that sort of little area of Egypt on the east side of the Suez Canal there. Like that was kind of seen as Arabia, was that mostly Jordan an area at the time. So he went down into that area, and then later to Damascus, which Damascus, you probably know now, it's in modern day Syria, a little bit north now. So he went into these different areas immediately and spent some time there. But you see what Paul's doing here? He's telling his story. He's just telling his story. Why? Why does Paul decide here to tell his story? Well, it's because his story matters. It's because it makes a difference, because it's impactful. His story actually helps to confirm the truth of the gospel. Paul's writing this letter, and it's written to some followers of Jesus Christ, and I can imagine him thinking as he becomes aware of the confusion that they're being thrown into, and not just confusion, but like intense sort of confusion. Remember, we talked about the first ritual, the first hoop they wanted these folks to jump through was they wanted them to get circumcised, and they were like, you can't follow Jesus unless, and people were like, this is creating some problems for me, right? And they were struggling. And so Paul's like, oh my goodness, I'm hearing about all this stuff going on in Galatia. And I can imagine him maybe thinking to himself, what can I write that would make a difference in this situation? You ever have a situation like that in your own life where you think, what can I say in this text? What could I say in this phone call? What could I type in that email that is going to make a difference? What can I say when we get together for coffee? Like, what is it that would make a difference? I sort of think that Paul might have been there. Like, what could make a difference in this situation? What could I say that would be helpful? What words could I use here? How can I assure these folks in Galatia that the good news of Jesus is the only news they need? It's the only good news. And he wouldn't have known, but that same question then would go out to us and to anywhere in the world, but in Edmonton in 2022, how can we assure people that the good news of Jesus is the only good news that you need? Pardon me. Instead of crafting some very carefully worded arguments, and I mean, Paul was an intellectual dude. He was well trained and well studied. Very, very smart person. But instead of kind of putting together some carefully worded arguments and, or laying a heavy guilt trip on his audience, right? Like putting something out there that would lay a guilt trip on his readers, Paul decides to simply tell his story. He just tells his story. And his story helps to lift the confusion that the Galatian folks were having. His story confirms the truth of the gospel. His story confirms the truth of the good news of Jesus. Listen, the message of Jesus Christ, it's supposed to be life-changing, right? It's supposed to be life-changing. So if you were in Galatia in 50 AD, what would lend credibility to that message? How about a changed life? How about a changed life to lend credibility to a good news message that is supposed to be life-changing? I mean, what better evidence of the life-changing message of Jesus than a changed life? You see, Paul's story, it confirms the gospel because his story is all about life change. It's all about life change. But I'll say this, any of us, online, any of us who are followers of Jesus Christ, you have your own story about life change. For anyone who chooses to follow Jesus, there's always two parts to your story. It's exactly the same for Paul, exactly the same. Part one is my life before encountering Jesus. That's the first part of your story of your life. My life before encountering Jesus Christ. Part two, yep, you guessed it. My life after encountering Jesus. Part one, my life before. Part two, my life after encountering Jesus. See, a relationship with Jesus is all about life change. And the reason that your story of life change matters, and the reason that it makes a difference, is because, like Paul, your story confirms the story of the gospel. Your story confirms the message of Jesus Christ. Quite frankly, it makes it real. It makes it real. It's not just some pie-in-the-sky idea that we read about or hear about from 2,000 years ago. It becomes tangible. It's something you can get your hands around. It's something that I can get my brain around, and I can hear your story and make sense of it, and you can hear mine and make sense. It's something it's tangible. And so Paul writes, Galatians, you remember my life. You know who I was. You know what I was all about. You heard all about me. You remember part one of my story. You remember what my life was about before Jesus Christ. I used to go around imprisoning Christians. And worse, I used to go around killing Christians because I wanted to destroy them. And I wanted to destroy anything that had to do with this Jesus fella, his church, his people. I used to go around doing all these things. I mean, Paul was a bad guy. I mean, he was a bad dude. And he says, everybody's reading my letter, everybody who's listening to my letter 2,000 years later that he wouldn't have even known about. He says, you remember how badly I wanted to put an end to the whole Jesus thing, how badly I wanted to put an end to the followers of Jesus Christ. And then he gets to a very key word. This is a key word in Paul's story, and it's a key word in my story. It's a key word in your story. Paul writes this, you remember part 1 of my story, but, and he writes, when God, who set me apart by birth and called me by his grace, remember, that's what he wrote, but God, who set me apart from birth and called me by his grace. That's the turning point for Paul. This is the hinge in his story. This is the turning point on which everything else goes on then. And it's the turning point for all of us. But God, as Paul says, when he called me by his grace, but God, I was doing this, I was going this way, my life was all about this, and you know the chaos I was creating and the things that I was doing, and I was trying to stamp out Christianity once and for all. But when God called me by his grace, you know, I have my story. You got yours. I shared a little bit of a snippet into my Tennessee portion of my story here with you. Part 1 of my story, I wanted to make money. I was going through junior high and high school, and I thought, I think I can make a lot of money. And I was trying some stuff. I did 50-50 raffles in junior high. In grade 7, I was selling tickets to my teachers. They had the most money. My friends didn't have money, and so I would sell tickets, and I'd make hundreds of them, and I'd sell them, and then somebody got the winning ticket, and they'd clear half the pot, and I cleared the other half. And that worked really well. I was getting some bucks out of that. There were different things that I tried to make some money in grade 7 on. Actually, prior to that, I was doing some stuff too, but that's just another part of the story. I sort of thought to myself, you know what? I want to own my own business. I want to be my own person. I wanted to own real estate. I thought property development and land development was a good way to go. I was looking at the U of A, as I've told you before. I was doing a dual registered two years in a row and didn't go to my classes. I was going to do a business and law degree that it was a 6-year program at the university here. Don't even know if they have that anymore. But I'm telling you, for me, it was going to be up and to the right. I was sitting there preparing this part of the sermon, and I looked, and on my desk I've got this tiny little trophy. It's about 3 inches tall. And I got it in 1987. And when I graduated from high school, there was a lot of election stuff going on amongst our grad class, and one of them was most likely to succeed. I got it. I can't tell you how proud I've always been of that stupid 3-inch trophy, most likely to succeed. And I thought, that is going to be me. I'm going to blow the doors off this world. I was going to make a pile of money, and I was going to make a name for myself. It was all about me. But, there it is. There's the hinge point. But, I encountered Jesus, and I grew up going to church, but I encountered Jesus in a way that I never had previously. Part of that occurred at Pine Lake Camp. Part of it occurred on a camp team. But I was challenged by God's grace to look in his direction first and my direction second. I was challenged by God's grace to look in his direction first and in my direction second. And I'm telling you, that was life-changing. It changed everything. It changed everything. And I think I did succeed. I think I did. I've got a great family, and I've got a great church family. There's a bunch of you in this room who have a 2-part story. A whole bunch of us in this room. There's some of you online, and you've got a 2-part story, right? Part 1, I used to, but part 2, I encountered the grace of Jesus Christ. There's a whole bunch of you who have a 2-part story like that. I used to, part 1, but part 2, I encountered the grace of Jesus Christ. You have a story, and your story matters. Your story has value. Your story has impact beyond what you can possibly imagine. Your story, like Paul's story, can help eliminate some confusion for somebody in our world, in your arena of life today, who doesn't yet know Jesus Christ, or your story can simply confirm the truth of the gospel, the truth of the good news of the life-changing message of Jesus Christ. You know, when I was a student in Bible college, I go back to 1987, and I had a class in Bible college called Personal Evangelism. Personal Evangelism. And my instructor was an extremely extroverted preacher named Alan Dunbar. And many of you would know Alan Dunbar. This guy was outgoing like few people were outgoing. And he was a big presence, larger than life, and a fantastic preacher. And he led this class. You know what this personal evangelism class was all about? Can you guess? It was about sharing your story. Sharing my story. And one of the first assignments that we were given in that class was to go out and practice telling our story to somebody who was already a Christ follower. It was just to give us the opportunity to share our story, because most of us hadn't done that sort of thing before, and we hadn't really thought of it before. It was like, I guess I invite them to church, hope they come to my small group, which small groups weren't even happening back then. There wasn't even some Bible studies. Hope that they might come, I can invite them or whatever. But this was go to somebody who's already a follower of Christ, and I get to share my story with this person, and it just gives me an opportunity to practice, to work through, to sort of go through it and process my own story in a very safe environment, right? That was what it was all about. So I got set up to share my story with a lady named Edna Hunt. And some of you have met Edna long ago. She's passed, but a great gal. And I don't know if it helped. I don't know if it helped to sit there with Edna Hunt, who was a few years older than I am now. I don't know if it was helpful to do a practice run. But I'll tell you what, it took things out of the comfort zone a little bit. I'm a pretty extroverted dude. I don't have too much trouble in most scenarios, but that was a little bit weird. A little bit weird to sit there with a gal that I really didn't know well, who was kind of grandmotherly, and share my story. I don't have a dramatic story like Paul's. I've never killed a Christian. I've never imprisoned a Christian. I don't have that kind of story. It's dramatic in that way. My story is I was simply looking at doing my own thing. And I was going to do my own thing my own way. And I can tell you it was going to be the right way. Don't you have that sort of, your way's the right way, isn't it? I was going to do my own thing, my own way. But you know, when I think about it, that's a lot of people in my neighborhood. They're doing their own thing, and they're doing it their own way. And life's not working, which is why we're trying to let people know we can make life work through Jesus Christ. Because life's complicated, and it's not easy to navigate. But that's a bunch of people in my neighborhood. That's a bunch of people who were on my kids' sports teams. It's the parents of the kids that were on my kids' sports teams. So I think to myself, you know what, my story isn't dramatic like Paul's, but my story matters. My story has value. My story makes a difference, because my story might be their story. My story can become somebody else's story, right? In the same way that my story was maybe someone else's along the way, right? Or maybe somebody, as I share my story, they simply see themselves in my story, but they don't if I don't tell it. Nobody would know. Nobody would know that I lived in Tennessee if I didn't tell you. Nobody would know anything about Jonesboro probably if somebody didn't tell you. Nobody's going to know your story if you don't share it. Same goes for all of us, right? You have a story, and it matters. Just catch this. I've said it probably 3 times, but I'm going to say it again. I've put it in bold and underlined it in my notes. Your story confirms the life-changing message of Jesus Christ. Your story confirms the life-changing message of Jesus Christ. So become a storyteller. All of us. Become storytellers. There's somebody that you know. Maybe it's a parent. Maybe it's somebody else in your family, a son or a daughter or whatever it might be. It could be a spouse. Could be a neighbor, or maybe it's a coworker or somebody, a student that you go to school with. There's somebody in your life, maybe multiple somebodies, who need to hear your story. As much as we want to say, invite them to church, invite them to your group and stuff, tell them your story. Tell them your story. Become a storyteller. You know, I can't help but think, what could happen if we were all to do this? What if we all became storytellers? What if we all could go to the International Storytelling Festival in Jonesboro this year and tell our story? What if we could all do this? How could telling your story impact the people that you know who don't yet know Jesus? Have you ever told anybody your story? Do they know? Do the people around you know? Or do they just know that you're a Christian? Do they know your story? Or do they simply know that, yeah, they're a Christian, and that sounds kind of religious, and that sounds kind of confusing, right? That's the world today that we live in. What could happen if you shared your story with them? Part 1, before I knew Jesus. But Part 2, after encountering Jesus, the grace that changed me. What would happen if you shared your story? And on the flip side, what would happen to each of us? Not just the person on the receiving end of hearing your story, but what could happen for each of us as we become storytellers? We would be on the front lines of sharing the good news of Jesus Christ, which is really what it's about. Which is really what being a follower of Jesus Christ should be about. Telling others. Following Jesus would become so much more than just coming here for an hour on Sunday. It would be far more personal. Far more personal. And I'm just sort of venturing a guess here, but if let's say 80 of us or so, 80 or so of us who are Christ followers here at this church, that you have a 2-part story. Part 1 before, but, and then part 2, that you have a 2-part story. If we all shared our story with just 5 people, and I'm going to guess that you know more than 5, but what if we all just shared our story with just 5 people? This church could have a front lines impact on 400 people. 400 lives in our city or in our area, or maybe somebody out the side, who knows where the truth of the gospel would be made. The good news, the truth of the gospel, would be made real. That it would be confirmed, because it's a life-changing message, and I live a life changed. It would be confirmed, it would be released from the confusion of religion that is so present in our day. And when people would be introduced to the relational grace of Jesus Christ. I mean, how cool would that be? If we could just bring it back to Jesus and not all the other stuff. And let people know how Jesus has impacted us. And listen, if you're here today and you've never embraced Jesus and the whole concept's a little woo to you, and you've encountered religion along the way and it's turned you off and you're not sure and you don't even know why you're here and you don't know why you're watching online, let me just say, if you've never embraced Jesus Christ, you already have a part 1 of your story. You already got part 1. That part's down. You got it, right? That part has been written. But would you consider living out the rest of your days with a second part to your story? Would you consider having a second part to your story? That part 1 doesn't just continue, that there's a but, that there's a hinge moment, that there's an encounter with the grace of Jesus Christ, and part 2 is a part that begins by receiving the grace of Jesus Christ. A part that then goes to striving to follow him the best that you can. It's absolutely life-changing. It's eternity-altering. And I hope that you would consider authoring a part 2 to your story. And I'm telling you, that can begin today if you would choose to do so. You can tell the person that you came with. You can tell the person who told you to watch online, or you can call the office. You can talk to one of the staff here. You can come in and visit with us. We'd love to have that time with you. You can email, text, whatever it takes, right? We'd be so happy to talk with you about receiving the grace of Jesus Christ and being baptized as a disciple, as a follower of his. All right, let me pray for you, and then we're done. Father God, there's so much going on here in this letter that was written to the Galatians. And in so many ways, I read that letter and I think, man, it was written to the Edmontonians. Maybe it should be titled Edmontonians. Because it's so applicable to us. And God, we all have a story. We all have a story. Some of us, it's part 1 only. Others, part 2. We have a 2-part story because there's that hinge moment, that but when I encountered the grace of Jesus Christ. And God, may that story not just be internalized by us, but would we become storytellers, the likes of which this city's not seen before. God, would you use us to make an impact, to share our story with others, to confirm your message, to confirm your life-changing, eternity-altering message by simply sharing our 2-part story. And God, for those of us who were in part 1, we're in part 1 right now. And that story, it's being written, it has been written, and maybe today is that moment where we say, but on that day in November, I encountered Jesus in a way. I realized that there was an opportunity to follow him that was not just life-changing, but it was eternity-altering. And maybe that's your story today. And you're about to embark on part 2 of your story. Oh, I hope that would be the case for so many, God. Father, any of us who have not yet said yes to you and entered into that relationship, would we not be confused by religion, but we would be empowered and just fall in love with your grace and the gift of your Son, Jesus. It's in his name we now pray. Amen. I hope you have a great week, and let me know if you're able to help out with delivering these postcards. We'd love to have you involved. Take care.